I'm Miriam Joy and welcome to my studio. We're going to have lots of fun with our project today. Let's get started. So for this project we're going to be using caulking, and I'm using Dab, the Alex Plus. You want to make sure this is white. And I pick mine up at Walmart. This is under $2 usually, and how I know it, because some of those get so mixed in, the last numbers are 101, so that is what I use. I also use an easy caulking gun. This makes it so much easier to use and to load over the other ones. I also use a frosting tip cover. This is kind of a newer thing. I purchased that at Hobby Lobby, and I can put that on the end and save it. And also my clippers. I just clip the ends off of the caulking with that, and then that makes it really easy to do, and we're ready to go. So we're going to be doing our faux leaves, and we're going to be using the frosting tips, and they start really small. This one's a 67 and I have a 70. I'm going to be using the 70 because it matches the size of daisies I made, but I wanted to show you one that was fatter. See how fat this guy is compared to how skinny this guy is. We want to make sure that we don't use the fat ones because we want to tuck it under our leaves. So that is the reasoning behind that. So adjust your size to whatever size leaf you have. And we're going to color our caulking here. And I usually use about a half a tube in a batch, but you can use as many as you want to. I think it's easier to make up a batch and have them all ready than to try and do just a little bit for a project here. And I'm trying to figure out how much I want to do. I'm just gonna leave it right there. We're just gonna, I guess we'll finish it up. I can always use leaves. There's more in that than I thought. And that is all done. There's nothing more to push, so we'll throw that away. And we're going to color this with our food coloring. There's a couple reasons why. It doesn't change the texture of our caulking, which is our frosting. And instead of using like acrylic paint, it waters it down and you can use the shape. I'm going to be using food coloring that is leaf green. And you can buy it at your craft stores, you can buy it at Walmart in just the frosting, cake decorating section. And it doesn't take a lot, whereas the other colors or other things you use to dye it, it takes a lot more. So think about that, and I'm probably going to be really bright here. I'm using a bright green because my daisies are no color basically except for the yellow in the middle. So the color comes more from the leaves that we add. So that's the reasoning behind that. Once you have that stirred in real good, we're going to load it up. I'm using a butter knife. Don't mix it with your household. Go to the thrift store, buy something just for that purpose only. I do use the adapters because I want to change my tips. If you don't want to, you can just put your tip straight in your bag. But I always end up finding that I want to use it, and I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So we're going to put that on there. You can use a tall glass. That's another thing I need to pick up from the thrift store, but just going to use an old container. And as you can see, these are just my old containers that I save from stuff we use in the kitchen. Sour cream, cottage cheese. We've got advertisement for Crack an Egg. And we're just going to put this all the way in here and get it all scraped and out as much as possible. So once we get that in, we're going to squeeze this all the way down. That's why I like using the thin disposable bags, unless you're doing something a little bit harder. And I just twist this all the way down, keep that nice and tight. And you can use a clip, but I always want to make sure that I have just enough that I can hold in my hand, never more than that. I'm going to take my wax or parchment paper and cover my tray. Do that so it curves down instead of pops up. And we're going to do a push and pull. We're going to make sure that when we're holding it, our tip is out on each side. Each of that's come out to the side. And we're literally going to push and pull up. We'll do that a little bit better here. Push and stop and pull up. And you can take your finger, but you also can trim this with your scissors when they're dry. So don't worry about it being real perfect if it's not when you first did it. And each batch kind of depends on that little tip, kind of depends on a few things, and I'm not always quite sure. Probably the day, probably the humidity, how much we stirred it, because that kind of warms it up. And however big or long you want to make these, the more you push and pull, the more ruffled it's going to be. The slower you kind of push and pull, the flatter it's kind of be. And I kind of am pulling or pushing just a little bit when I pull that up to get that tip. So, and you can also kind of wiggle that back and forth to give it a lot more body too. So really play with it. There's a lot of great videos on how to do frosting. You can go look at those and use any of those to help you. Just encourage you to do as much of that to learn how to do it as well. And then just go ahead and finish as many as you have in your little frosting bag and finish them all up. So our leaves have dried, and you can see how much darker they've gotten. I did some big leaves and I've done some small leaves. There's so many ways you can leave them just like this. You don't have to do anything, but I think half of why I like what I do is because I add detail to it. You can float color on either side of the leaf, and I do have a video on how to float color. And do one on one side and one on the other, and just on either side of this ridge right here in the middle of the leaves. But I'm going to use one of my favorite things. This is Inca Gold Metallic Rub, and this is a wax-based product, and I love this. This is one of my favorite things to do. Now I clean my hands with hand sanitizer alcohol, because this is basically a petri dish if you don't, and it will grow. So, and if it does, you can wipe it out. If it gets hard on you, I have videos on how to soften it up again. But I like using my finger. I'm really bad that way. And our leaves have dried several hours. I usually just leave them overnight. You can trim them with the scissors. That's what's so great, like this guy right here. You can come in and just trim him up, and then he is good to go again. Kind of follow the shape of the leaf. But now we have this rub, and this rub is so wonderful because it brings out the highlights and the lowlight of your leaf just with gently rubbing this. And the more wiggles we had in a leaf, the more fun it is to apply this. Isn't that wonderful? And how simple that was? Now, if you didn't have that, you can look for that online. I found mine at Joann's, but you can go online and look for the Inca Gold. This is green yellow. Excuse me. I don't like the other green. There is another green, but I just don't care for it with everything I use with the leaves and the frosting stuff. So just gently rub it wherever you want it, and you are good to go. Now, you also could use a little bit of pigment powder on your leaves if you wanted to. You could use some gold, you could use some green, whatever you wanted, just to make them yours. I hope you had lots of fun and enjoyed that. If you ever have any questions, send us an email at art@miriamjoy.com. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our videos so we can continue to grow. God bless.